can come across as prejudice. It can come across as, someone with, I know better than you kind of an attitude, right? What I have realized is those hard conversations, the quicker we have that, the better the solution is going to be.
In Amazon, there's this leadership principle called disagree and commit. When leaders sit in a room and they have to make decisions, it's natural that there will be disagreement. Eventually, one path has to win, and whether that's driven by data, whether that's driven by like quick bias for action.
I think there's a popular framework called state framework. I don't know if you guys heard of it. I think Sushmita kind of mentioned this, start with the facts. Like you share the facts at the beginning of the conversation. Don't lead it with emotions, like lead it with the facts.
Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Our Tech Chronicles. This is episode 31 and you are in for a treat. We have not one but two guests with us today to talk about this interesting topic. We have the power couple, Sush and Dev, all from different backgrounds but have a wealth of experience to be able to weigh in on this topic, which is navigating difficult team conversations. Sush, would you like to introduce yourself to our audience?
Thank you, Roshan. Hi, my name is Sushmita Datta. I am an engineering manager with the Audio AirPods EPM team at Apple. I've been now with Apple roughly almost 8 years. It becomes 8 years in September. And before that, I worked in very different industries. I come from GE Healthcare, and even before that from Caterpillar. So varied backgrounds, robotics, medical device, and now into consumer electronics. I've worked as an individual contributor, and now I manage a team of 4 gentlemen. So it's been a very, very interesting topic. Especially this particular one of having difficult conversations is something that I'm very passionate about and something I'm learning as I'm growing. So looking forward to it. And thank you for having again.
That is awesome to hear. We are privileged to have you. Thank you. Deb, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Hello. Hi, Roshan. Hey, Sangat. Yeah, so I'm currently a senior scientist / an applied science manager at Amazon. I recently made the switch to a management position from being an IC for God knows what, about 20 years or so in the industry. Most of my career has been in primarily in medical devices, starting from Philips Healthcare, then moving to GE Healthcare, had some startup experience as well in this area, and then finally made a switch to consumer devices, and that's when I joined Amazon. So yeah, this topic is very close to kind of my heart, because as a manager, one of the things that you have to do continuously is to evaluate your team. And many times you have to have some hard conversations around their performance, and prepare your group, coach them, prepare them for such conversations, and so that they grow in their career. And if they're not growing, have some hard conversations, align them to the right direction. So it's a very important topic for me, and happy to learn from all of you about your experiences and also chime in on what I think, how we should do this.
Thanks, Deb. We are honored to have you. This is going to be fun. All right. So before we get started, let's have a quick fire survey, right? When's the last time you had to give tough feedback?
I'll go first. I have had to give a tough feedback as of July 3rd. The reason I remember this is because the feedback I gave was in a very public setting. So it wasn't fun, but it had to be done. Sometimes it's unavoidable situations where you gotta curb it before it goes above your head. So yeah, that would be the most recent one that I've done.
A follow-up question. Did you
Sure.
script it or wing it?
No, I winged it. It was not scripted at all, but it just all came about to a head where if I had a better situation to give that feedback, I would have done it on a one-on-one setting. But it just came to a head because of the way things align and with the things we're going, that it had to be given to say, hey, this is something that we need to talk about. And the way I left it is, we need to talk about this. I'm going to come back from my remote week or whatever, and then we're going to have this conversation, just to make sure I can close that circle, close that loop out, and not leave them hanging to say, okay, what is she going to come back and talk about, kind of. So it was completely not scripted. It spontaneously came out almost.
Yeah, I get
Yeah.
you. Yeah. Anyone else?
Yeah, mine is not as professional one, but it was with my teenage daughter.
Mm,
kind of convincing her to stay away from screens. That's an ongoing tough and hard conversation. So far, I haven't made it.
yeah.
I think so as I mentioned, I just very very recently became a manager. As a manager, you are exposed to such cross-functional teams, and you are like forced to give hard feedback, especially if the other teams are not performing. So I haven't had that exposure yet, but I would say as an IC, I actually had many chances to give this hard feedback to managers from other teams that I was dealing with, interacting with. So I think that the way I handle it is in the sense of um, one situation that I can remember in the startup was that we were working on a Friday evening, and this manager shows up, and he was very harsh in kind of asking for when are we going to deliver that thing, right? And it was a Friday evening, right, 5 o'clock, and somebody shows up, says, okay, can we get this thing on a Monday? And I feel at certain level, there are ways you can ask for that kind of like request, but it's just the way that the manager delivered the request was very unprofessional. So I had to the way I kind of managed that was, at that time we kind of like pushed back on that, but then I let it sort of sink in, and then because I don't want to give that feedback right away, because I'm like, maybe I'm very frustrated, maybe I may not be speaking the right, my mindset may not be in the right, I may not be giving the right feedback. So I just took a break over the weekend, thought about it, go on Monday, set up a one-on-one with him. I first of all, I just said, I apologize for the kind of like the harsh way we spoke. But then it was very nice, because when I opened up, he opened up. And he actually apologized in the end, that he also realized that it was a very harsh way of talking, and in the end we actually kind of settled it up, and we so in summary, I feel like many times just taking a break and not sort of not reacting to the situation right away can actually help settle down things. So that was probably the only situation I can think of where I had to give a very hard feedback, but then we sort of managed the situation together in the end.
I love these answers, and I think there's a lot of things you both of you mentioned that we are going to unpack in this session,
Mhm.
right? So it's gonna be fun. So let's get started, right? So why do hard conversations matter? What happens when you avoid them?
Yeah, I think. Go ahead.
No, go for it, Asanka.
I think just to give another analogy, maybe hard conversations are like getting your kids to eat vegetables, right? It's not enjoyable, right? But it's important for your health and growth. So I think hard conversations really shape the outcomes of your organization, of your team.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's important to make those decisions. There's also a very famous book called Crucial Conversations. I'm not sure if you guys have read that. So, as per that book, there are three circumstances under which hard conversations come into being. Like most of our conversations are like professional, casual.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you might have disagreement, debates, but they are not necessarily hard conversations.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, as per the authors in that book, something to become a hard conversation, any of the three items, I think one is like, either you have very opposing views, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're not on the same page, like, you're not aligned. So it becomes a hard conversation to get alignment. Second one is, I think, Dave, you kind of mentioned, sometimes people are emotionally charged. you're not thinking rationally or logically. So I think another aspect of it, when you're emotionally charged, it's become really hard to have a logical, sensible conversation with somebody. And the third piece, I think we do this in the organization with the right intent, is that when the stakes are high, right? So what is the right time to go to market? Like, that could be a really hard conversation. People can have different perspectives. So I think those are kind of the three different angles that could really give rise to a hard conversation.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think
yeah.
the so I think to the first point that you mentioned, in Amazon, there's this leadership principle called disagree and commit. So the idea is like when a group sits together in a room, leaders sit in a room and they have to make decisions. It's natural that there will be disagreement. But I think eventually one path or one choice has to win, and whether that's driven by data, whether that's driven by like quick bias for action, and what we say is like we bias for action, we take a path, but and everybody has to commit. So in Amazon, it's very commonly said when in a group, when some decisions are made and you don't agree with it, but you still say that, okay, I disagree, but I commit. And so that, I think that's a very important sort of, for me, it's one of a very guiding principle in a lot of our meetings. That if you don't agree, you don't harp on it. You basically say, okay, we can't just keep harping on this. Let's just disagree and commit, move forward, and if it doesn't work out, we can come back and move to a different direction, right? So I think it's very commonly encountered in our meetings. But yeah, so that's just wanted to comment on that piece.
Yeah, and for me, I think the hard conversation part is actually very important because what it allows to do is it doesn't fester that commentary, that thought process in your mind, and then eventually it comes out in an inopportune moment where it's not supposed to be, right? Because it's like any other relationship in your lives. We end up spending such a large chunk of our daily lives at work with these people interacting, even though in a perfect setting, they are all people, you're forming these bonds and friendships and work culture, work relationship with them, and they are perfect strangers to you outside of that. They are not your family members, but you're spending a large chunk of time, so you feel that same amount of emotional connection, that the psychological connection with them, which if you don't address it at that immediate moment, maybe take your time out, think about it, it can fester into something that's even more ugly. It can lead to miscommunications, misunderstandings, and become something more bigger than it really needs to be, right? And the other aspect of things that I'm noticing right now is one of the most important principles that we, when I became manager, is giving feedback in a timely manner is very critical, because the moment is lost if it's 2 months later, 3 months later, an year later. You're like, well, I don't remember this has happened, or I don't remember it a certain way. So it's very important to give timely feedback, otherwise you can't expect that person to change, right? So it's if you're trying to do something, you're trying to impact something, it's very important to have that hard conversation and impact and make a change happen. Otherwise you're just going to sit expecting it to happen when nothing has really been done towards it, right? So for me, it's one of those things which is like, I don't want to sit thinking about it, and I don't want the other person thinking about, oh, everything is fine, let's just move on, whereas I'm not okay with that, right? So it's very important to clear it out, clarify, and like Deb mentioned, agree to disagree to some level, to say, you know what, we're not going to agree on this if you can't agree, but let's move on. It's behind, let's move on, let's be a professional, let's work towards a unified goal. So
I like that. Just to add from my side, like it's maybe a different dimension. So people issues, right? If
mm-hmm,
you don't have these conversations,
mm-hmm,
it can affect your whole team's morale, right? It can lead to confusion. Like for example,
100%.
someone keeps missing deadlines and nothing is said. The team might think, do deadlines even matter, right?
Yep.
Or is there favoritism in place? So these are
Mm-hmm.
things that nip it in the bud. Like timely feedback, I think, like you mentioned,
Yep.
is very important. Which brings
Yeah.
you to the point now. What are common scenarios that leaders face where they have to have these hard conversations?
Sure, I can go first. There are a couple of places that I've seen. The most typical is performance based.
Mm,
If someone in the team is not performing up to the par of somebody else's expectation. And one of the ways that I have kind of addressed that is, and this is a learning experience for me where I've come out of it to say I have to be I have to be non-prejudiced in looking at the feedback. I can't take a feedback from a person A and go
mm,
tell it to my team member and say, oh, so and so said this. I'm giving you this feedback.
The way I go at it is more of, is this feedback coming from this person's subjective analysis of the topic at
mm,
hand, or is this more objective,
mm,
right? Is this a personal feedback based on their expectation of how this team member is working, or is there a data behind this that is saying more like, oh, the ABCD should have done this, instead they did this, and they missed the timelines, and so on and so forth. So before giving feedback within my team, I do my own analysis and looking at it from a perspective of, I have to be non-partial. I have to be impartial in when I'm giving that feedback, to the point where I can make it actually what we call a smart feedback. Is it actionable? The feedback that I'm giving the person, are they able to change something actively? Am I giving them an action item that they can implement and see the difference in that, right? Or am I giving them a feedback that's like, okay, great, you told me this, but what am I supposed to do? Like, how do I make a difference, right?
mm,
So
mm,
that is one of the most common feedback that we get, is a performance one. And then the second one is where it's really hard, and this is more based on personality. Is not everyone is same, right? We are all different marbles in a ball, in a big glass ball, and everyone is kind of trying to intermingle and stay. And the moment one goes out, you shatter the ball, right? So I have to be also careful about people, or interpersonal conflicts between people, and how people work with each other, right? And that has been one of the biggest things that I have had to deal with, is when somebody is having that interpersonal conflict without understanding or without realizing that the way they're talking to me or to their peer is not necessarily uh, being deemed as a professional way. It can come across as condescending. It can come
mm,
across as prejudice. It can come across as, someone with, oh, I know better than you, kind of an attitude, right? So that kind of a conversation is where I initially struggled with. But what I have realized is, those hard conversations, the quicker we have that, the better the solution is going to be. So to me, it's these two folds. One is performance based. Again, the performance one has to be addressed very, very immediately, because those have immediate repercussions on ongoing programs and topics at hand. And the behavioral ones are ongoing conversation that has to happen. And again, you and the person you're having with that conversation decide how long of a runway you give and how much you're willing to give it. But you have to come at it from a very, very open mind, from understanding where they are coming from, and then giving them the opportunity to understand where you are coming from. Because if it's a closed conversation that I'm not going to give you the time of the day, it's not going to fester. It's not going to work out that way. So that was my take on it.
good stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Thank
What
you.
are other scenarios? Maybe I can go. I think Deb,
Yeah.
you mentioned this slightly as well. Giving the unpopular no, we can't do this, right? uh, I think that sometimes it takes guts to stand up and say, okay, everyone's all excited about this, but maybe we need to pump the brakes or
Mm-hmm.
de-scope it or something. That could be a tough conversation, and you need to be ready to back it up with some data rather than feel. But that is something that I've been put into sometimes. Anything else?
I think the other thing that all of us deal with in our regular job is escalations.
Hmm.
That's I feel it's a very common scenario that all of us face, and uh, I would say it's a hard conversation per se, but just taking the guts to escalate it to your leaders,
Hmm.
uh, and finding the appropriate time to escalate. Because I think one thing that's fairly standard rule is, when you are kind of blocked, uh, try it out for like 2 to 3 weeks before you escalate to the leader, because you don't want to go and escalate to a leader without having any recommendations. right? Because the leaders are not the right people who should be a sounding board to find solutions, right? So escalations are kind of conversations that are needed in the workplace, and they're hard because the leaders would question you, but the way you sort of demonstrate your capabilities is by providing some recommendations that, okay, yeah, you've thought about it. You're just not going there for solutions. You're actually coming up with solutions. You're just asking for their help to really find the right solution, right? And many times escalations could happen between teams, right, if they're not working well together. And but I feel like positive escalations are always good, rather than giving that, oh, this, like blaming the other team, right? Oh, this team is not delivering, right? So in a workplace, I feel like in a very cross-functional environment, escalate if the two teams are not working together. But then it's important to provide recommendations as a path to move forward, rather than just kind of blaming. So I feel that's a important conversation. Not sure hard, but it could be hard sometimes.
I think our co-podcast host has this saying, "Don't bring me problems, bring me solutions." It's kind of in line with what that Yuresh, by the way, that
Yes,
Yuresh,
yes, that's
shout
what
out to
reminded
Yuresh.
me. Yes.
He says that. Um, thanks for sharing, Deb. I'll add one more, and then we'll move on to the next topic. Though
Sure.
I think the hardest of all, for me at least, is letting someone go. Hardest conversation
Yep.
sometimes. So that brings us to our next section, which is how do we prepare for this conversation? We kind of mentioned it a bit as well as you were talking about your scenarios. You mentioned, leaving emotion aside, thinking about it, taking a break, and being objective about it. What else?
I think there's a popular framework called state framework. I don't know if you guys heard of it. I think Sushmita kind of mentioned this, start with the facts. Like you share the facts at the beginning of the conversation. Don't lead it with emotions, like lead it with the facts. And then you have to remember, you have your own interpretation, like your perspective of something. So, explain that when you have the conversation, say, this is my understanding, this is how I understood this, like explain it to it as an, perspective as opposed to a statement. And then, give an opportunity for the other person to like open up and provide, that person's perspective. And more importantly, I think during that conversation, like it's not just a talk between two people. I think it has to be a genuine dialogue. I think the difference is that sometimes when people talk, you think you understand each other, but you might not have a shared understanding of what you really intend to communicate. So it's always important to kind of, check back, like, is this what you meant, right? In your own words, because people understand, express, the same thing in different ways. And then the fourth piece is like, don't make it assertive. Like make your statement in a tentative fashion, so that way you leave it open for some kind of negotiation, compromisation. Like if you just go really hard on somebody, like people will not open up, they will not want to have a talk with you, right? And then I think those you have to follow those few steps. And I think more importantly, this hard conversation is not something like you can really like learn from a book, right? It's something that you learn through having this over a period of time. If you yourself are challenged in terms of how you want to have that conversation, set the stage by saying, "Hey, I want to have, this uncomfortable conversation with you." That kind of set the stage. And just be honest, like even I'm not sure how to put this, like be transparent to the other person. That will set the right stage for the conversation. How I would approach, like just always like at Shushmita, like, think in terms of the other person's shoes, right? Like how would that person feel?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think one of the things that has come in very handy for me, Sanka, kind of resonates to what you were saying, is as leaders or managers, one of the things that, and especially when you are becoming a manager of a team overnight, where, they were your peers on a Friday and Monday, you're suddenly their managers, it takes some getting used to. Right? It takes some getting used to. And I found it kind of the hard way that all of a sudden the way what I say, how I say it, has a different connotation to people. I could joke about it when I know I'm joking about it, but to my team, they might be like, well, my manager said this, it has to be true. Or my manager said so. So, is that what is happening? Right. So I became more cognizant of who I was saying, what I was saying, and, how I was going about it. And during that phase, what I also realized is all of us were adjusting, right? I was adjusting to the new role. I was trying to get accustomed to, okay, what am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to do this? But what came in really, really handy, and this goes back to a course I had taken when I was in GE, was more about this triangle thing: is listen, ask, and then tell. So, as a manager, always have a listening ear. You're always listening first to what they have to say, ask clarifying questions about what you're hearing, and then tell. Don't go in assuming they're asking you for help and you are ready to tell them something, because that might not even be the case. So, and that has come in very, very handy, is and when I'm having my one-on-ones or any feedback session or whatever it is, I'm first listening to their side of things, asking clarifying questions to make sure I understand where they're coming from, and then telling them what I think can be done or how to process it, and so on and so forth, right? And the second aspect of that is, as managers or leaders, we're not superhumans, or the understanding of that we don't have human emotions or feelings. I'm always telling my team, this shouldn't be happening, or I don't know why this is happening, or I wish I had a solution for this. And that kind of normalizes the fact that I still feel and react the same way that they do. It's not any different just because overnight I became their manager, right? It's still the same person at the end of the day. And the third thing is, if I say something, I'm going to follow up. To be able to follow up on that, that to me is like number one thing in my mind. Is if my team cannot hold me accountable to what I say I'm going to do, then I have failed. As a manager, I failed them, because they are never going to be, they're like, oh, okay, yeah, my manager said that she's never going to do it, right? So for me, it's utmost important is, if I tell my team I'm going to do something, I'm going to make 99% of my ability to make it happen. And if I can't, I'm going to tell them, hey, I tried my best, I can't do this, this is where it is at. But it is very important for me to let my team see that I am trying, and I'm going to always have their back no matter what, right? And then that brings about it makes these tough conversations in my mind easier, because the first thing is we have to gain their trust. If you don't have their trust, no matter how difficult conversations we have, no matter how much we give them a feedback, that it's never going to follow through, is because they don't trust that I have their good intentions or their growth in mind, right? So for me, the first thing that comes about is, how do I gain their trust? And once I have that trust, it's having those conversations becomes more of a back of the hand conversation of like, hey, we need to talk. They're not going to be like, oh my god, my manager told me I need to talk to him. I mean, he or she set up a one-on-one. What is happening? Am I getting fired? Am I in trouble? Kind of a thing, right? They're like, oh yeah, let's chat about it. So for me, it's like, it's making it easier first and foremost by making sure they trust us, they trust you, is paramount to any other topics that come about after.
I think
Like,
on the performance side, one thing that I would say also, that's so two things that I would say. Right, first thing is, when you want to put somebody in a performance improvement kind of a thing, very, very important that you before you decide to put somebody in that plan, it's very important to actually have 5 or 6 sort of important, I would say, role guidelines, like things like, okay, how are they performing in terms of delivering results? How are they performing in terms of working in ambiguous situations? How are they performing cross-functionally, right? So have these like 5 or 6 roles slash role guidelines, and ask them like, how do you feel they've performed in all of those, right? And kind of so calibrate them on those like quantitative, semi-quantitative, right? Because you have defined these metrics and you want to actually give a chance to the person that, how did you perform? Write it down, and then have a way to say, okay, is this person better than 50% of your team, right? If the person is not really raising the bar of your team, uh, I mean, and have some strong sort of evidence that why is the person not raising the bar of the team, right? So I feel like having those very quantitative metrics. So two things, right? Having the roles and have the person right, and second, calibrate that against the other team members in the team, right? So it's a very objective way of figuring out like how do we who we should put in a performance improvement and who should actually is so yeah, just want to kind of say those two things. Like these kind of methodologies really help shape
Oh yeah.
and shape the conversation when we have them.
One thing that has worked for me when delivering tough feedback is this SBI framework, right? Where I try to be as descriptive as possible, saying this is the situation, this was the behavior observed, and this is the outcome. Like for example, in yesterday's planning meeting, you cut off so and asserted your opinion, and what happened was the entire team felt shut off, and no one then interacted and shared their ideas. And so we want to foster a culture of blah blah blah, blah, right? So I try to
Yeah.
use that. Um, but I think the idea that all of you all are saying is make it a dialogue, right? Either this is what you observed, be sure about it because this is why
Right.
you have a conversation, but then have a dialogue and then see what are the next steps, right? Which
Right.
actually brings us to the our final piece, which is now that you've had your conversation, what do you do after the talk?
Yeah. And I think, it goes back to one of the things that I was talking about is following up. You have to
Mm.
continue to follow up, right? You have to continue to follow up depending on what kind of feedback you have given, what kind of conversations you have. If it's a performance feedback, yeah, especially if the feedback was coming as an escalation path feedback that's coming from a senior manager, director, whoever, continuously following up and keeping a tab on like, hey, is this person doing okay? Are you seeing anything? Am I missing something? Right? So following up on that and making sure that the person that was given the feedback is also feeling okay with either
Mm.
the amount of extra work that they're now having to do or the way they're doing it. They need to be okay with that as well, because if they're going quite a bit out of their comfort range, they need to feel comfortable coming in, being able to do that. And one of the things I always tell my team is I want to make sure that, when we wake up in the morning and come into work, we need to feel happy about coming to work. We need to feel like, oh, yep, it's another day. It's a hard work, but I'm happy I'm going into work kind of a thing, and not we wake up as like, oh my God, here we go again kind of a thing, right? The moment we feel that, you're teetering at the edge of burnout. Either burnout because you don't like the work, either burnout because you're overworked, or just something is not working out, right? So that's something I continuously keep checking. And the second one is if it's more of a behavioral or emotional, psychological, whatever kind of a conversation it is more following up and keeping a more closer tab on, is this person continuing to seeking feedback in that case, right? Is the person that he or she is working continuously with, reach out to them and get feedback. Hey, how is this conversation going? Has it gotten any better? I saw you had this meeting with so and so. Did it result in a positive way, in a negative way? So following up actually makes it a huge difference, because again, it's making your life easier to have that next set of either tough conversation or simple conversation, because now you have the background. You're not going in ill prepared in another set of conversations like, oh, I don't know how it went, right? So I think being prepared for it on both ways and following through really makes it, in my mind, easier to make tough conversations more a dialogue, more of a, hey, let's work through this, instead of, I have been told ABCD, go do ABCD, and that's it. Like, it's more of a telling kind of a situation, right? So I think following up and being able to sustain and keep it as an ongoing dialogue, and having actually determined checkpoints. Let's follow up in this in a quarterly, having a development plan and put in place, like, hey, let's work through this. Tell me where you feel you need to work through in your development plan, in your growth plan, and let's work through those details. That shows them, that you're truly vested in their growth, as well as enabling them to take charge of their career, their development, and making that effort to say, hey, this needs to be corrected. Let's work towards that. So for me, it's a matter of, continue to follow through until whatever it is that we're working towards is completely resolved and it's not a problem anymore after that.
I like that a lot. I think spot on. For majority of the scenarios we talked about earlier, the follow up is key, right?
Absolutely.
Um, and also,
Yeah.
except for the one where to let someone go, but the other one,
Yeah.
the other one also. What I like to do is sometimes appreciate if it's especially it's a hard talk.
100%.
I like to just
100%.
follow up and say, hey, I know that wasn't easy.
Yeah.
I want to let you know that you handled it really well, right? Or maybe a week later they've made some changes. Just a pat on the back. I'm noticing,
100%.
your change in
100%.
attitude. Keep it up.
100%.
Something like that
Yeah.
goes a long way,
100%.
isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, I want to iterate on one of the things you said, which is very important. Is one of the philosophies that I go with is I always kudos in public, criticize in private. Like I
That's a good
don't
one.
I
ever
like that.
want my team to feel I don't have their back. Like, if you've done a great job, fantastic job, right? You worked as a team, you enabled the team to make it happen. And if something did not work out, let's talk in one-on-one. Let's figure it out what didn't happen, because again, it's a very cross-functional, right? Everyone is trying to do their best. So putting the morale down in a public setting is not going to go very far. So for me, that's like my main motto is I'm like, I am always going to have my team's back. And if you've done something stellar, 100% kudos in public, in the cross-functional team, to my directors, senior directors, whoever it is. And if you have missed something that should have done, let's talk in private, let's figure it out so that that doesn't happen again in a public setting. So that goes a really, really long way.
Hasank, I think we got another one now. Like, don't bring problems, bring me solutions. Kudos in public, criticize in private. I love it, love it.
Yeah.
And I think one another thing that I've seen, like I haven't personally been through this performance improvement, right? Either giving somebody or going through this, but I have seen other colleagues who have gone through this. What my manager did at that time was mostly it's a professional environment, right? There's nothing personal when you let somebody go. It's nothing like it's all an objective decision that the business made, right? So I think you can always say that it's a business decision. And maintain, like, I think if you could maintain some sort of a healthy relationship when you let a person go, maybe help them find a job, right? Maybe use your contact, right? Maybe they are not just meant to be in that group, but they could survive and thrive in a different group.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's very important. Keep it a healthy relationship.
Keep it human.
And,
Keep
it
it
human.
100%. 100%.
And yeah, just follow through. Like, I mean, maybe a week later, just call them up, right? How are you doing? And I think just keeping that relationship is important, right? Yeah, so that's what I feel. It's not the end of the world. That's what I'm trying to say.
Exactly.
It's a.
But I have another question before you wrap it up, Prashant. So this is for Sushta and Nabid. At home,
Sure.
I'm sure you have
Oh,
hard
boy.
conversations.
Yes.
How do they go down?
It's funny you ask, because as much as I am a confrontation avoidant at work, at home I'm the polar opposite. Like if I have something in my mind, it's on my face. Very soon it's in my mouth and it's out there because I can't sit on it any longer. And I think Deb is very much the opposite of it, where he's probably not even thought of it from that perspective at all. And when I say something, the way I say it, or I have, it's come across in a different pattern to me, where it's made me upset or made me think differently or whatever. One of the things which we have had a hard time on is, and Devashish, you need to correct me here, is one of the things that Devashish would say is, "Oh, but it doesn't impact me the same way." And what I've had to tell him is, it's not about you. It's not about how you feel. It's about how what we are having a conversation about impacts the other person. Right? You got to take yourself out of that situation. You got to put yourself in the other person's shoes and say, okay, doesn't impact me the same way, but doesn't mean it doesn't impact the other person the same way, right? So it's been 15 years of a work in progress, I should say, but it's gotten better. It's definitely gotten better. There's been no pips put in place, so to speak.
Indeed, hard
Well, I
work,
think
right?
that's why I feel like as males sometimes we are very self-centered. Maybe we are thinking too much about ourselves, but you have to grow the I would say put in the other person's shoes. Like that's what I call like empathy. So you're trying to put yourself in the other person's shoes. The one thing that Sushmita has taught me is when she's talking about a problem, don't try to come up with a solution. Right? She's not looking for a solution. She's just looking for an ear to hear that problem out. And just like I think that's really one of the things that is important as a manager as well, right? When somebody
Yep.
is coming up talking about some issues, it's not that jump and try to find a solution with that person. Maybe
Yep.
that person is not even looking for a solution. That person is
Yep.
just talking about it, right?
Yep.
So I think that's the empathy piece is important, right? In a
Yeah.
relationship as well.
100%. And to the empathy piece, I mean, this was a in my mind it was a personal victory for me. This past week actually was a year of me being a manager for my team, and I feel like it kind of resonated with me when one of the team members I was working with came about and said, "Hey, I am sorry. I should have given you this information ahead, and I didn't, and I felt bad. You've been really fair with me in everything, and I feel like I owe this to you. And I'll correct it and I'll move forward." And this all came automatically from them. No push from me. No hard conversations had. Right. So it's it's the adding that human piece, adding that empathy piece, adding that, hey, I hear you, I understand, I get where you're coming from. Not every step is a ticking time bomb, not every step is a landmine. We can have open conversations, open and honest conversations. I think that makes life a lot easier for everybody. That makes these hard conversations more like a dialogue of an open pathway where, like, hey, it's a two-way path. You get respect, you give respect. It's not like a one-way path as like, not definitely not a do because I said so or my way or the highway kind of a thing.
That is awesome, and congratulations, Soch, on
Thank you.
1 year.
Thanks.
Um,
Thanks.
and very importantly, thank you so much for being part of this podcast. I thought this
For
was a
sure.
really fantastic conversation on a
Thank you for
top
having
topic,
us.
and thank you for sharing
Absolutely.
your insights and thoughts and everything.
For sure.
Yeah, just to summarize, we talked about why it's important to have these conversations,
Yep.
how what are scenarios, what are common scenarios leaders go through,
Mm-hmm.
how do we prepare, how do we actually have the talk, and
Yeah.
then most importantly, what do you do after, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I hope all of you found this useful and insightful.
Very much
Please
so.
drop comments if you want us to talk about more stuff like this.
For sure.
Otherwise, see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Take
having
Thank
care.
us.
you.
Bye bye.
Yeah. Bye.